Should we be excited about Lane Pederson, Chris?
Well, I think everything he's done up to this point, you can't say that it's been a bad thing for sure. You should be excited about what you see with Lane Pederson. Listen, he was a throw-in the Ethan Bear trade. He was also he played for the Sharks before. He was in the Brent Burns trade.
Yes.
Which was kind of interesting as well. But I mean, obviously, incredible start for him in the AHL. I talked about it with Bruce Boudreau a little bit today, actually, just kind of asking him about. Listen, Bruce has a lot of respect for the AHL, right? Like you kind of know this. He's a guy who respects what these guys do in the AHL and what success like the AHL can potentially translate to in the NHL. We also know that the management group and Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford also very much respect what the AHL can do. You saw that with what they did with the Pittsburgh Penguins in their time there. Pederson's interesting because when I talked to him in Abbotsford, and this was right before he got called up, he was like, he was saying like he's working on all the other parts of his game because he doesn't think he's going to be in the role that he is. Like he wasn't going to be, he was first line, penalty killing, power play. He was doing all that in Abbotsford. And when he talked about it, he's like, listen, I know I'm going to be in a depth role when I get called up to the NHL. Like it's going to be very different. So I'm working on those parts of the game. Then he gets here to the NHL and he's playing with Elias Pettersson. And he talked about it a little bit today when I chatted with Lane about like, it's just so great to play with such a smart player, right? He talked about it with Pederson. And the other thing I asked him, because I asked, like, you can ask all the simple questions of like, well, what do you like? They're going to say good things about him. But I asked Lane Pederson about like, what do we not see? And he's like, the communication after every shift of like Pederson being so vocal about where he wants the player to be, where he wants to just kind of directing things for that line. Like that's something that you don't see from every single player on every single shift. But that's something he said, like he really likes Pederson because like, playing with him, he's going to tell you where he wants you to be, where you want to go. And if you go there, you're going to have success. Like, let's look at pretty much every line mate Pederson's ever had. Their numbers have gone up when they play with Pederson. So it's a good spot for Pederson to be in, obviously.
And this was pointed out in the Stanchies last night. Lachlan Irvin making his debut on the Stanchies did a fantastic job. He pointed this out. And again, I think this was a thread between Daniel Wagner, Jackson McDonald, a few people on Twitter as well kind of brought this up. That Lane Pederson might actually be a guy.
New pair of boots last night, brand new pair of Christmas boots last night in the press box. Legs look good in those boots. They got buckles on them. The ones that got about 40 holes. Those things go up on legs. Be careful. They go up very high.
Like showed up in his thigh highs?
Pretty much.
Okay. Anyways, what was I even saying? You throw me off with your boot talk. Okay, that was what I was trying to say. They had a little thread where they were talking about, hey, you know what? He might be a guy, and you need a guy. You need guys on your team. And when I say guys, I mean guys like, hey, Aaron Rome, Andrew Alberts, these guys. They were all guys on that 2011. Who else do I mean? I mean Connor Sherry. I mean like Jake Gensel. Jake Gensel's probably a bit of a different example. But what I'm trying to point at here is that, and, Scott Wilson, the list goes on. These guys that just show up out of nowhere. And hey, you'll notice I just used 3 examples from the Pittsburgh Penguins.
For sure.
Right? Could Lane Pederson be one of these guys that you just can play on your top 6 and then ship out once his value is really high and you don't pay him like a top 6 guy? Because, hey, like you look at what Pittsburgh was able to do. And again, that was Jim Rutherford that was the president of hockey operations. And I'm not saying that I know for sure that Jim Rutherford stormed into the Canucks offices and said, get me Lane Pederson. I don't know if that's the case, but all I'm saying is there's a history of Jim Rutherford led organizations that go out and get these guys that just aren't much, but turn into something. And look, it takes skill to play with a guy like Elias Pettersson. And again, you brought it up. Lane Pederson hadn't shown much in his NHL career to this point. He thought he was going to be in a depth role. Instead, he's playing with Pettersson. He's having success. I understand the sample size is small, Chris, but it's to the broader picture of the quads plan and just any like team that's kind of in this state where the Canucks are. You don't want them to be, paying big bucks to guys like Connor Garland and Tanner Pearson, right? And again, that's not a knock on those guys. It's just that what they're being asked to do, you might be able to find it in someone younger. You might be able to find it in someone a lot cheaper just because of how good the players on your team are. Now, I don't want to lump those guys all into that, all the Canucks wingers into that, because, hey, if Ilya Mikheyev's not on this team, if Connor Garland's not on this team, or Brock Besser, any of the wingers, whatever.
Yeah.
If they're not on this team and you have 6 Lane Pedersons, only one of them's going to play like the Lane Pederson we're seeing right now. I don't know if any of this makes sense. It might be hard to follow, but what I'm trying to say is when Tanner Pearson returns from injury,
where does he go?
Is Lane Pederson getting bumped out of the lineup so that Tanner Pearson can slot back in? Because honestly, I think that is subtraction by addition. Like I think the Canucks are a worse team with Tanner Pearson in the lineup.